Dan McTeague joins the show. Dan is the gas price wizard himself, a former Liberal MP and executive director of Canadians for Affordable Energy. He's here to help us make sense of these latest developments coming out of the Global Climate Summit. Dan, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, Alexander. Thanks for having me today. And yeah, always never a dull moment when you're following the 30 years in which great developments take place out of the COP, going back to my early days when when the first Brazil Rio conference took place, and I thought that was very interesting with some notable liberals in my time attending that, being a force behind it. And of course, that's all changed now.
Yeah, it's all for the worse now. Maybe it started with good intentions, as roads are often paved with it. So it just wrapped Friday in Brazil. All the usual degrowth net zero characters were there, but it's getting harder and harder to deny that the devastating impact some of that zealotry has had on our economies. You called out their hypocrisy in a recent video. What do you make of Carney's words coming out of the summit? And do you have any cause for optimism that Canada's stance is changing?
Well, I think Canada's stance may be changing as a result of reality, not because of what Mr. Carney wants. I mean, they've had to
Yeah.
abandon, the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax. Looks like they're going to have to do something on tanker bans and a whole series of other concerns, electric vehicle mandates. All these things are proving to be colossal failures, as was expected, by the way. And none of these things were done with a consideration of reality being given priority consideration as these policies were advanced. But it was all wonderful. I mean, because it was 2015, we could do all these things, but it had a detrimental impact on the bottom line. A real disappointment for those who invested billions of dollars of public money and to some extent private sector money as well. But all this has really taken us to a place where I think Canadians have realized, and even reluctantly liberals have realized that they've really pushed the envelope to the extent that the country can't function right now. Its decline is on almost every single economic metric, and that will
Yeah.
lend itself to disunity in the country, and the likes of which we haven't seen certainly since the mid 1990s, or even folks like myself go back far enough, back to 1980, 81, 82, when there was real concerns, not just with Quebec, but also a sense of alienation in parts like Alberta and Saskatchewan, even British Columbia. What this has meant is it has been a 10-year experiment in fooling around with woke ideas that have very little bearing on the sustainability of our standard of living and the quality of life that we have in Canada. And it's completely ignored the significant importance of hydrocarbons. Like them or not, they're here. And all those organizations, including the International Energy Agency, the Mark Carneys of this world who thought they could, get GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, to go choke off capital to oil and gas producers in the United States. By the way, they wound up with what could have been a very close antitrust violation, which would have cost Mr. Carney and his friends a lot of money. Nevertheless, what I think has happened here is that someone's taken a bucket of cold reality water and poured it over everyone's head. And while there's some out there who will simply admit that this thing didn't go well, there's others that will simply say they're going to fight this to the last drop. Unfortunately, Canadians are the ones paying for this, and around the world, nations are walking away from this. And those that are walking away from it have a strong GDP to productivity number. They're doing very well. They're flourishing. And they still, from time to time, ask Canada for the things that they truly need from Canada. No, not hydrogen, and no, not electric vehicles. But in fact, they want our resources. They want our minerals. They want our oil. They want our natural gas. They want our timber, and they want our agriculture. It seems to be a coterie around Mark Carney and the liberal cult, which is not the same as when I was there as a liberal for 18 years as an MP, that keeps saying no. Why? I don't know. But with a $78 billion deficit added to another $1.3 trillion in debt and a debt to GDP, real number, when you consider the provincial's sub-sovereign debt of about 112%. I think the game is over. And I think for those of, like Mark Carney's of this world who go down to these wonderful summits to make this idea that we can do things as it were, the past 10, 15 years, are kidding themselves. They're deluding themselves. Reality, I think, is a real motivator of policy these days.
I think so too. And I know Doug Ford drives you crazy also, in my work with the National Citizens Coalition, Project Ontario. I see your tweets also when I'm busy angrily tweeting about him, where even he is admitting in his sort of haphazard approach to the tariff situation. It's like, well, Alberta has something that people actually want. It's like, yeah, is that not an admittance that this EV subsidy boondoggle, that this entire industrial complex has been just complete fugazi, that it isn't it's been entirely propped up by the government, and it has been this artificial attempt to influence people's consumer habits, and nobody actually wants it. Like they want life to be affordable. They care about the environment, but it is no longer. I wish that they were getting here under non-false pretenses, these changes, because if you look at the latest polling from Abacus, for example, and David Coletto, it's like for the first time in a long time, the environment is not a pocketbook issue.
Yeah.
Like the key ones are what you'd expect. It's affordability, it's housing, it's immigration. It way down the list is, taxing the working poor to pretend it changes the weather.
It makes no sense. Of course, it's not really environmentalism either. It's all about one
Yeah.
particular molecule, which we tend to associate as being somehow lethal to our existence. And it's been this nonsense that we have followed for many, many decades that has now, I think, led us to the point where we realize that this is. It isn't very, very wise environmental stewardship. If it were, we wouldn't be using graphites, polymers, extracting with massive
Yeah.
acids. I want people to understand something. When you make an EV or you make any of these little electronic products, it's done through mining. Mining is the second most polluting, and I'm talking real pollution. I'm not talking about CO2, the stuff we emit every day and is inert and we need it for the flourishment of life on this planet. But it is extraordinarily intensive. Forget the fact that maybe in countries like China made with coal. The fact is producing, extracting is extraordinarily difficult, very time consuming, very capital intensive. And of course, the cost and the damage to the environment can't be gainsaid. I mean, it's significant that ignorance has been prevalent in the minds of many people who thought, oh, I'm going to drive my electric vehicle and pretend that I'm holding some kind of environmental credibility. You are not. You do not. And frankly, I'm tired of poor people in this country paying for rich people to drive around virtue signaling in their latest rides. At the end of the day, I have some experience in the automotive sector. I worked media relations for a little tiny, tiny company, Toyota Canada. And that company said no to EVs. I mean, they'll build them because there's a lot of grift going on out there. But their
Yeah.
future was in hydrogen. Their future was in solid state batteries, if anything, not lithium ion. And the future is in hybrids, and which is what companies like that have gone from number 5 to number 1 in Canada, staying true and staying focused on what the public wants. And the public is fed up. They're broke and they're sick of the kind of woke environment and top-down lectures that we're getting from international organizations who, at the end of the day, do not have the public interest at heart. They have their own agenda at heart. And that's quite often a real conflict when it comes to the amount of money that they're making by these decisions, especially when they're pursuing and pushing products and ideas that they benefit from almost exclusively.
No, it's true. And if you look at the conditions in those mines in Africa, for example, where they get out the damn components for these batteries for the EVs, they're like unconscionably bad. Like it's really reprehensible stuff to see and read the reports about them. And maybe the Japanese have their heads screwed on straight better than we do with not sort of chasing indulgences. Because yeah, it's like Toyota and Honda both acknowledged very early. It's like, oh, whoops. Like, let's get out of EVs pretty quick here. Let's
Yeah.
keep on, our hybrid fuels. Let's keep, providing products that people actually need. And they're always going to lead the market in that regard. Now, this beloved conference that drives you crazy and drives me crazy. It ended with a communique that scrubbed all mention of fossil fuels. Like we obviously see that the jig is kind of up, but and yet you see these rhetorical devices. You see these efforts with language, what they're doing. If you're Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, would you not be licking your chops when you hear this kind of stuff?
Love the fact Canada wants to walk away from the things that makes it prosperous. And if
Yeah,
we don't want to sell it, they will. They certainly will. And
yeah,
there's other, half of our country gets oil and its products from other parts of the world, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But
yeah.
be as it may, that if that's the way in which your system is based, that's great. That's wonderful. But the problem is, when you're leaning up against a massive debt in which no particular sector of the economy is doing fairly well, you got to sort of get creative. I mean, the things that built this country were its resources, the extraction of its resources, the responsible extraction and production and refining of its resources, and manufacturing. Um, my family, the McTeagues, came from Scotland. On my mom's side, we've been here since the 1600s. They're French, but on the father's side, came to Peterborough, Ontario, one of the largest manufacturing hubs in the country. And both in the First World War, Second World War, led by Edison Electric. Actually, it's called CGE, Canadian General Electric. But I digress. A town that used to be a manufacturing hub is now nothing. It does no longer has manufacturing. And like so many cities across this country, yeah, you can rely on public sector and the service sector to carry some of the stuff. Beautiful country that it is, and lakes and whatnot, and people can retire up there. But if we don't produce anything, we have nothing to offer to the rest of the world. Sooner or later, we'll find that, is it any wonder, as I mentioned earlier, that on many metrics, any type of way in which you want to look at our economy, we are in significant decline. I would call it free fall. And the only thing keeping us in is this rhetoric used by the left that continues to somehow believe that we can, I don't know, use this, our Canada Pension Plan, QPP, as collateral for bad debt, as collateral to somewhat impress people to come invest in Canada. If investing in Canada was such a good thing and an enviable thing and a worthwhile thing, we wouldn't have $1.41 to buy a US dollar. Our currency would be a lot stronger. We wouldn't see the erosion of our purchase power because we've decided to block pipelines, block natural gas, not build any LNG, and tell the rest of the world that if you want to get a mine here in this country, it's going to take you not 2 years, but 10 to 15 years if you're lucky.
Yeah. Now, switching gears to carbon credits. I mean, I think there are some signs of mild encouragement when it comes to some of the rhetoric we're seeing from the federal government. But Carney still uses language like carbon neutral AI data centers, if that even means anything. Throws around traditional energy like it's a pejorative. It reminds me of the term cisgender, which seemingly exists to sort of marginalize the majority of the population. If companies are forced to buy carbon credits, to keep buying carbon credits, which in essence, at least to me, are a kind of a climate indulgence payment. And the United States and our allies and competitors on the global market, they're not doing the same. Aren't we again putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage for seemingly no good reason?
Yeah, and the other thing came COP 30 was the idea that they would no longer make reference to carbon border adjustment mechanisms. But the bottom line is that if we are going to continue to virtue signal, we can do so as we continue to find that everything in this country is falling to pieces, and there is not much in the way of anything positive coming. In the short term or the long term, these projects, these grandiose projects that Carney's been talking about for 7 to 8 months, many of them have already been announced, take years in order for them to really gain traction.
Yeah.
But if we are going to say to what everyone universally understands is going to be the game changer in economies, whether they create jobs or not, by saying that we can do it without, by windmills, by solar panels, most of that, by the way, made in China, and some of that highly unreliable, especially when the wind isn't blowing, or maybe battery backup, as some are suggesting, and spending billions of dollars in. That is no way to provide a reliable energy source for the demands that will be sought. So Canada wants to exclude itself from that. By all means, keep your elbows up and make sure that you understand those welfare checks will not be cashed if we aren't attracting the kind of investments in this country based on the newer and emerging economies. One area that AI needs, obviously, is energy. One thing we do produce a lot of is energy. And I don't care what kind of, you want to talk nuclear, you want to talk hydro, natural gas backup, propane, oil, there's a diesel. There's a number of ways in which Canada can come at this. But if we're going to condition it, all we're doing is cutting our nose off to spite our faces. We are doing damage to ourselves by allowing that kind of rhetoric to prevail against the economic interests of this generation and the next generation. And there is nobody who was given a mandate to do that in the last federal election. If Mark Carney thinks that's the case, take it to the public. And by the way, if we're going to go on this idea of decarbonization of everything, including our pipelines, and that we desperately need to build overnight, and you're going to suggest that people, well, hey, it has to be carbon neutral. Who the hell's going to pay for that? Do Canadians
Yeah.
wind up paying the cost of sequestration, which is dangerous in itself, I should point out? Yes, we have it, but there is so much to be said about the impacts that no one wants to take into consideration. I'm saying to you now, If we have a government that says it can only be carbon neutral, and the only solution is somehow CCSU or CCUS, whatever, carbon capture and underground storage, to use what it really means, and it's going to cost tens of billions of dollars. It isn't going to be paid by other players around the world. It's going to be paid by Canadian consumers. You want a 10 or 15 cent a liter increase in gas prices? Go ahead, because we just got rid of the carbon taxes based on the same phony idea that we could somehow, virtue signal our way into creating more alternative forms of automotive and get better efficiency. We got efficiency, but we sure as hell got hit hard and impoverished a lot of Canadians in the process.
Yeah, we sure did. Dan, we're seeing in Alberta right now, people are encouraged by the fact that there might be this memorandum of understanding that's been signed. But we're also seeing that those bad bills haven't been killed. So like last week in so many ways was a banner week for Albertan leadership, Premier Danielle Smith taking on all kinds of common sense conservative causes, but if they're going to get this path to a bitumen pipeline to the Northwest BC coast, if they're going to get past BC Premier David Eby, who's perhaps no greater threat to quote unquote Team Canada, who's been an absolute joke and is childishly sniping from the sidelines while his economy goes to hell, and British Columbians, I'm in BC, are worried if they're even going to keep the rights to housing, and I can't even afford a house. Like, what do you make of this development? Like, do you expect this potential pipeline deal to hold? Is it a good sign, or is it just, you're offering just a trinket to appease them, and you're by not killing these bad bills, is anything really getting any better?
I don't see how you can build it without, again, massive amounts of money put into sequestration, carbon capture, as a condition for getting these things out. Then you have to go over a number of other hurdles. You mentioned David Eby, and of course he's spent time as your previous premier, John Horgan, who I crossed swords with many times in my time as a gas buddy and whatnot, saying you killed Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, you're going to wind up shooing away a lot of investment, and you're going to wind up, with the federal government holding the bag. Not that you have the constitutional authority to do it. Eby thought he did, and he got clean. He had his clock cleaned by the Supreme Court of British Columbia. But that aside, if we're going to continue to be obstreperous and say, no, we can't do these things, and that there's a danger and a risk. I mean, look, there's dangers and risks in everything we do. We could walk down the street and slip on a banana peel and break our neck. But this has gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. We've had 10 years of climate fanatics being pushed by the NDP, who was once pushed by the Green Party to take positions that have been both archaic and wrong. If BC doesn't want to become part of selling its resources to the rest of the world, including all the gas in the Montney, then say so. And by the way, given what they did to chase out Kinder Morgan many years ago, I'm still steamed at this. That cost us $50 billion. BC has a debt to the rest of the country, at least the BC NDP, which it should damn well pay before trying to create and put more spokes in the wheels of a country that desperately needs to get its product to market, because the world realizes what is valuable in Canada: our natural gas, yes, if you want, our LNG, our oil, and those things which are derived from it. And if we can't get it to market, it's not Alberta's failure. It's not Alberta that's going to fail. It's the country that's going to fail as a whole. So conditioning these things has significant implications for the country, its economy, and its future. And if people think they can sit back and, I want to make sure it's nice and clean and have this kind of, Pollyannish or, this immature discussion about how Canada's not doing great, fine. As I said to many people before, don't go for any more healthcare, because that's how it's paid. Don't ask for any more pension system. Don't ask for infrastructure. Don't ask for welfare checks. Don't ask for any type of handout. No free dental. If you don't want these projects to go ahead, then say no. Sign a waiver saying I want nothing to do with social programs. We'll see how many people still have their elbows up when that happens.
Oh, it's so rich. I mean, even out here, there's this constant debate right now, headed up by the tired and emotional Elizabeth May,
Oh,
to borrow a British parliamentary term. The tanker ban, where we're just cutting off our nose to spite our face, where American tankers stream by the BC coast in the dozens per day, but we're not allowed to move one. This Team Canada, it reads as such an insult to so many, particularly generationally, because we've all been able to watch and go like, no one harms Canada like these members of quote unquote of Team Canada. And so it's incredibly rich. I appreciate your frustrations and your leadership on this file. Thank you for all that you do with Canadians for Affordable Energy. And Dan McTeague, thanks for joining us.
Sarah, thanks for having me. Look forward to doing it again.